Welcome to the second to last video in this Java Basics lecture week. Going forward after these last two lectures here, we will be having considerably fewer videos. I sort of just, as a reminder, separated these out for everybody so that if you only really needed to brush up on one specific topic, it would be really easy to find sort of which of these you wanted to rewatch. But going forward, the topics just blend together a little bit more. So there won't be like 10 videos every week because that would be crazy pants. So let's talk about arrays. This last set of uh, two videos is all about successfully implementing and manipulating arrays. Um, Arrays are effectively lists of data. They are objects that store a group of values, and all the values have to be the same type. So they all have to be int or doubles or strings. You can't mix and match, but they can they can contain any number of elements, including none at all, and that's okay too. However, once you've set the size of your array, you can't change it. That means you can't overfill it. If it's full, you either delete things, you um, delete and add new things, you overwrite things, or you have to make a brand new array and copy the whole thing over into a bigger array. Once you've set the size of it, it cannot be updated. Now, when we make a new array, just like we can see, I've got just like a basic creation of an array here. We have int square brackets, which means array. And that's just because like the very front of it kind of looks like square open brackets, I guess, and the end of it. Um, Array of ints equals new int array. And then inside the brackets, I put how big I want it to be. So I put 10. So I have 10 spots here, all with zeros in them because there's no value. Like I haven't actually given any values. I've just like made the space. However, when we do this, it's important to understand that array of ints doesn't actually equal this array. That's not actually what it equals. Now, it's more like the memory address. We're referencing space of the array. We're like holding the address of an array in a variable. This is very, very similar to if somebody asked me where I live and I told you my address, I wouldn't be handing you my house. I would just be telling you where you could go to find my house. My house still exists. Everything is in it. If you go to my address, you're going to find my house. But if you say, hey, where do you live? I don't go, here you go, and I hand you my entire house. That doesn't make any sense. And that's, of course, because houses are very large. There could be various amounts of information as part of the houses. We don't really know ahead of time. It's a lot easier to just say, sure, come on over. Here's my address. Come over. I'll show you around my house. That's exactly what arrays are doing. So this array variable doesn't store the whole array in it. It just is sort of a keeper of the address to the array. So then when we go and say, hey, we really need to get into the array, this variable can lead us there. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Okay, so like I'd said, when we make a new array, we obviously don't put any information in it to begin. So the new array will be filled with default values for each type. So for integers, it's zeros, doubles and floats, it'll be 0.0, of course with the added bonus of an F for the floats. Boolean all starts off as false. A char array, they all start off as whatever an empty character is. And then any object array, we're going to talk more about what that actually means later, but it does actually include strings. Each spot is equal to null. Another thing we will talk about in a little bit. So just like any variable, you can declare and instantiate them in separate steps. So first we have our declaration right here, int array, array of ints. Right now it is just declared. It has to have some kind of a value, even though we haven't given it what we want the value to be. So think back to when you declare an int and assign the int in two separate steps. If you say int age, semicolon, what does age equal? Well, it equals the default value, which we know to now be, if you didn't know before, 0. If we say int, if we say double x, and then that's the whole line, we set x later on, what did x equal initially? Well, it will be 0.0. If you do that here, if you declare your array, any type of array, an array of ints, an array of doubles, but you just declare it, you don't actually assign it a value. You don't initialize it. It starts off being equal to null, and then we can go ahead and initialize it, and that's the information that we can actually now fill with additional information. We can kind of equate this to being like, I'm trying to like think about a good way to put this in terms of my house example, um, but I can't really think of one. Null is like a void hyperspace though. It's like not really, it's not the same as like an empty lot or anything like that. It's not even that. It's nothing. It's just saying there's literally nothing here. You can't go into this. This isn't referencing this doesn't even have an address. It'd be like if you said, "Hey, where do you live?" and I just handed you a blank piece of paper and I was just like, "Here," and it was just blank and you'd be like, "This isn't helpful." That's kind of what null is. It would just tell you that I don't have a house, like I don't have a value. So that's basically what null is here. And then when we actually give it a value, then it now has all the default information filled in. Once we actually instantiate it or initialize it or assign it, all those words have slightly different meanings. But basically, once we give our variable an equals and then a right side command, now it has a value. Okay, so you can also, so all of those examples sort of show default values, but you also can hard code values. Like if you know ahead of time what you need to fill your array with, there are ways to just hard code the values into the array. Right here, we have the first way where we could just say int array data 1 equals new int. These brackets can be empty as long as they're followed with the curly braces and then all of the ints you want to put in your int array. So you don't actually have to give it a size here because when you make it with default values, the size will be obvious, right? The size is obviously 5. This can also be done in 2 separate steps. Int array data2 equals new int array with the same information. That's totally fine. You can also shorthand your hard coding initial values if you do it all in the same line. So this data1 could have been done without this here. That wasn't necessary because we did our declaration and our initialization, our assignment, all in the same line. There's nothing wrong with putting it there, but it actually isn't necessary. If you declare the variable on the same line as the initialization, you can just omit that new int square bracket. That's totally okay. Uh, so even though we can't change the size of our array, we can always update the values in it, and it's very simple to do. So that's always really good news. So here's our initial array that we created, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Data 1 now has each of those values in it. And just like a string has indexes, and there are characters at each of those indexes, like the previous video, here we can now reference the information at each of the different indices. Once again, we start counting at 0. So data at 0 equals 7. We'll go ahead into data 1 at spot 0 and change it to a 7. And so we can see right here what the new value of data 1 is going to be. This is very much like coming to my house and changing out my daughter's Bluey sheets for Mario sheets, or my son's Mario sheets for Pokemon sheets, right? You pick a specific point in the address and go and change that information. So data 1 gives us the address, and then the index tells us what part of that we're actually looking at. Here, data 1 is equal to data 0 plus data 1. So what we do is we take data at 0, which is 7, and we take data at 1, which is 2, and we add them together. We're going to get the, oh no, multiply them, sorry. We multiply them. 7 times 2 is 14, so data 1 will now be 14. So when we try to print out system.out.println at data 1, what's it going to print? It will just print 14, because that would be like, again, specifically, we're not printing the whole array. This also says data, which it should say data, oh God, should say data 1, but my examples are always like this. Okay, system.out.println data 1, printing out spot 1. So this is like specifically coming to me and being like, what sheets are on your daughter's bed, or like what brand of milk do you have in your fridge, right? It's referencing a specific thing. It's not the whole, you're not asking me for a full inventory of my house. You're asking me for a very specific piece of information. Data one at spot one is going to give you 14 right here. And that's all that will print. Okay. And again, just like strings, you're going to notice a lot of comparisons between strings and arrays, and we'll see more why next week. But for right now, we can just say we're going to see a lot of similarities between arrays and strings. When we get the length of an array, basically how many pieces of information are being stored in there. It's really easy. It's very similar to strings. There is a dot length method. The only difference is that instead of having round brackets, there are no brackets at all. So you take the variable name and you say variable dot length, and that's it. You can see it right here. So right in this line here, I say system.out.println myArray.length. Well, what's the length? Let's see how many elements we have. One double, two double, three doubles. This is going to print 3. Come down here, just like strings, just like .char at, we can go ahead and reference the position based on other information as long as it actually exists in there. So here we can see we're saying myArray2 dot length minus 1. Well, what is that? myArray2 1. I literally can't even handle myself because this code won't run. Oh my gosh, I'll have to re-upload all of these. This should just be a 1, and this should just be a 4. There we go. We can see that that needs to be a 1 and a 4 because this is an int array, not a double array. But none of that really matters for the question, except that this code won't run if you go and try it for yourself. I'm really sorry about that. So my array2.length has 3 elements. Now it has a 1, a 2, and a 4. So my array2.length has 3 elements, and then we say minus 1 leaves us with the value of 2. So this statement here says system.out.println my array2 at index 2. 0, 1, 2. It's going to give us the value 4. So that's what gets printed out. Again, make sure you're noticing the difference between the length of a string and the length of an array. Length of a string has those brackets. Length of an array does not. This array will work. Attempting to print this out is not what I meant to do, because this was supposed to be this comparison. It's unbelievable. I mean, oh, sometimes that's okay. We'll do our best. We're all people. We all make mistakes. Apparently some more than others, but we're all people. That's okay. So system.out.println array.length, no brackets. System.out.println string.length. We can see there are brackets. That was really all I was trying to show you in a very roundabout way of a million errors. I'm so sorry. Okay. The last sort of biggest piece of information when it comes to array basics is printing of arrays. So unlike in Python, you can't just put the array variable in like I just uncomfortably did right here. You can't do that. If you say system.out.println and just put the name of like the variable there, it just prints out the reference. This is like asking me, hey, what's your address? And I just tell you my address. If you said, hey, what's in your house? I'd be like, too many things to list. Come to my house and see. Here's my address. That's kind of like what this is doing. It's basically just going to give you the address and not actually give you the rest of the information. If you actually want to print out the information stored in the array, you have to go through the whole array in a loop. So you can see here I have a loop where I say int I equals 0, I is less than the length, I++, and then I can print out every single element array at I. So it'll print array at 0, array at 1, array at 2, and then when it tries to go to 3, 3 is not going to be less than the array length, which is 3, so 3 is not less than 3, and this will stop. Okay, so now we can see how to actually get this information. We go into the array, we go into my house, and we can actually then look in each room and see all the data that's in there. We can actually walk through the array and see all the information that's being stored at that memory address. Okay, um, a little extra tidbit that you can use is you can use the arrays package, the arrays book from the Java library. So import java.util.arrays, which we've seen before. We saw it with scanner before, but now we see it with arrays. And this gives us access to more behaviors. Just like scanner gave us access to the scanner object with .nextLine, .next, .nextInt, we now can have access to this nifty extra method, arrays, capital A, .toString, and then you can put in the data here. In my case, this should be the array, right? Because I named it array, not, there we go. This should be the array. You put the array right inside here, and it will actually return a string representation of the array. So if you don't want to write a for loop when you want to print out your arrays, this is actually a totally fine way to circumvent that. You can use a for loop, you can use arrays.toString, both are totally fine. You wouldn't lose marks for doing either of those. Okay, we can do our pause and practice. So before you move on to array advanced, practice using array basics. Create an array of integers with this predefined values that I've given you, and then write a method that would reverse the elements of this array. This is tricky. The method should not return a new array. It should modify the original array. After we reverse it, we can print out the elements of the modified array. So for example, if we give it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, my output array after we reverse it should be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Give that a shot. Now, we haven't talked much yet about mutability and why things work the way they work. However, in order for you to be able to do this and fully understand it, all you really need to know is that when you pass in the array and you change it, it's going to affect the array on the main level also. There will be a video coming out about this and why this is the case, but for right now, it's okay to understand, to like not fully understand it and just take my word for it, that when you pass this in, like my array in as the argument to a parameter of a method, and then try to print your array back in main, it will have the changed values in